Hey everybody, welcome back to Garage Band Guitarist, and this is the second of the preliminary lessons before we get into the actual guitar lessons. And this one I marked as optional as well, but it's only optional if you've had music experience before. Okay, so if you played in the band in high school or sang in a choir or something like that, this will all be old news to you. This is for people who are starting out completely fresh and don't know anything about music. And that's perfectly fine if you're in that state and you don't know anything at all. I'll guide you right through. But those of you who have experience in playing music in band or whatever, you'll probably find this redundant with your existing knowledge. So you don't need to spend too much time on it. You may not even want to watch it at all, or watch it at double speed or something like that, because I'm going to cover some really basic stuff that gets everybody here on the same page, so you know what I'm talking about as I go forward through the course. Okay, and so basically it's optional only if you don't know it. I mean, if you already know it, it's optional. Okay, what we're going to do in this little lesson is just understand how we name notes. Okay, so and then the concepts of flats and sharps. Okay, and so those of you who have musical knowledge, if you know what I just said, if you know what that meant, then you can go on to the next one. Okay, that's what we're gonna talk about in this lesson. Okay, it's going to be a pretty short one. The last one about the equipment was pretty long, but this one's a little bit simpler in terms of what we're trying to cover. So we'll get through this pretty quick. It's not that difficult of a concept. There's just a couple little tricks in it, and that's the way a lot of stuff is going to be as we go through music. Some of it is logical and makes a lot of sense, and other parts are strange or they seem arbitrary, and you just have to accept them because the system ain't going to change at this point. Okay, there probably are better ways to do a lot of this stuff, but they grew up in various ways over the course of history, and they grew up in different places and merged, different systems merged together in terms of how to understand how to notate music and so on, and so they don't always make perfect sense, just like a language doesn't. The English language doesn't make sense because it's compiled from a bunch of different languages and things aren't always logical. Same thing with music. It's another kind of language like that. Okay? All right. Now, so this really is our first lesson about music theory, it's called. And, again, this is something everybody uses the term theory to refer to this kind of material. This is a very basic, starting from absolute zero theory. Okay, so there's nothing complicated about this. Of course, music theory gets extremely complicated, and you can, get a PhD in music theory, but we're not going to go anywhere near that. We're going to give you the basic stuff that you need in order to understand what you're doing in this course. Okay, so but the word theory is kind of misleading because there's nothing theoretical about this at all. It's really about the structure of music. Okay, and so if you want to think of it as structure as opposed to theory, it's probably makes a little more sense in terms of what we're gonna cover. Okay, so here we go. The basic building blocks of music theory. Okay, and it starts with understanding the names of notes. The names of notes, and that's the first thing that we have to grapple with. And this is really easy. Okay, you get this in 2 seconds. All right, because the names of notes are based on the alphabet. Okay, and so they are named from A to G. So the notes are A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There's 7 letters that we use. We don't go on to H and so on like that. Okay, so it's just those 7 notes: A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Okay, so there you go. You know how to name notes. You use the letters. Okay. Well, there's a little more to it than that, of course. So the first kind of that's not all in this is that sequence A, B, C, D, E, F, G repeats, okay? There's not just 7 notes. You probably already know that. There's not just 7 notes. There's way more, and some notes go really super high, and other ones go really low, and there's way more than 7 in that sequence. But what happens is they repeat. Okay, so you go A, B, you're going up, it's getting higher. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then the next note, if you keep going higher, is A again, and then you go through the cycle. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on all the way up. Okay, and the same thing going down. If you're at A, the next note below it is G, and then F, and then E. Okay, and so I laid that out here with our original 7 notes put in red, but then you can go up and down, and you can go a lot farther than I've shown in this graphic. Okay, the relationship between those A's, the first A and the second A, is they're the same note, but it's just higher. Okay, so here's an A, and here's the A that's above that one, the next A. And you hear how that's the same note but higher. And on a guitar, there's a couple of different A's. There's this A, there's this A, there's this A. And those are all the same note as you go through a couple of cycles. In fact, there's another one up here. Okay, and so as you go through a couple of cycles of those letters, you get a repetition of that note just higher. Okay, the reason they sound like the same note except higher is a mathematical thing about the vibration. Okay, and we won't go into that. It's interesting to understand the mathematical relationship between these notes and things, but that's not for this course. Okay, but at any rate, you have that when you go from you go through the cycle A to A or G to G, whatever it is. You have that relationship between the lower and higher note. That distance between those two notes that sound the same is called an octave. O-C-T-A-V-E, octave. An octave is that distance, that same note distance. It's called octave because if you go through the cycle, there's 7 notes, and then the repeater is number 8, right? So A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We're on 7. A. Back to A, that's the 8th note. And the OCT, like octagon you learned in school, 8 is represented by the OCT, the oct kind of prefix. Okay, so an octave is the 8-note span from one note to the next version of it that's higher, or the next version of it that's lower. That's an octave. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's the first thing, is that the cycle of notes repeats. Now here comes the second. That's not all. Okay, because then this one's a little bit more complicated. Okay, the issue with these letters and these notes that are represented by the letters is that some of them have a little extra half a note in between the letters. Okay, so between A and B, there's another note in there. It's like a half a note. It's like, A.5 or something like that. Okay, so it's halfway between the A and the B. Okay, same thing with C and D. In between C and D, there's another half a note, the C.5, if you want to think about it like that. Okay, and that goes on, but not all of them have that half note in between them. And that's the thing that's tricky and that you got to remember. They don't all have half notes in between them. Which ones don't? The ones that don't, and it's indicated on this chart here, are B and C. Okay, so there's no half note in between there, no 0.5 note. Okay, and then between E and F. Okay, so those are the two spots in each octave where there isn't an additional half note in between. Between B and C, you just go right to B. There's no B.5. Okay, you go from E to F. There's no E.5. Okay, so those you just go right to the next note. Right? That's pretty straightforward, and it produces in the end basically 12 different notes. Okay, 12 different notes. So because you've got 5 of those half notes added to our original 7, and so now you've got 12 different notes. And those are the notes that we use in Western music, okay? And everything we do in this course will depend on those 12 notes, okay? It corresponds to those of you who may have any exposure to a piano. It corresponds to the keys of the piano. And here's a graphic of the keys of the piano. And the white keys down here, those are our letter notes, okay? And you can see they're labeled, which one is which, okay? So there's A, B, C, D, and so on, okay? And it keeps going up and down. And I've got that original octave highlighted right there, okay? So you can look at the A through the A. But then the half notes are in there too. Those are the black keys. Those 0.5 notes are the black keys, okay? And so if you look at A and then you look at the black key that's right above it, that's the A.5 note that's between A and B, okay? And so if you count them up from A to A, you'll see that there's 12 notes. And that pattern of 2 black keys, then 3 black keys, and so on, repeats all the way up every single octave. Every single one replicates the others, okay? And so that's how that translates to the piano. A lot of people have had some exposure to piano, so I thought it was worth pointing that out because it's a very clear visual representation of the letter notes and then the 0.5 notes that are in between each one, okay? Now, we don't call them 0.5 notes or half notes, okay? That's just to help you understand the concept. They're called something else. And so I wanted to briefly talk about that and make sure you understand what we call those 0.5 notes, okay? Actually, each one of them, this is another one of the kind of complications of music, and it's not totally arbitrary, but we're not going to go into the reasons why in this course. But they can each have, here's the point, they can each have 2 names, okay? They each have 2 names. It's the same note, it's the same sound coming out, but it can be called one of 2 things, okay? And those 2 things are based on whether you're naming that 0.5 note, that middle note, if you're naming it on the basis of the key that's right above it, the letter that's right above it, or the letter that's right below it, okay? So if you look at one of these, let's take the one that's in between A and B. There's a note in between A and B. We can either name it using the A, in which we'd kind of say like A plus a half, okay? That's what we can do. Or we can name it with the B and call it like B minus a half, okay? That's the concept. What do we actually call these things? Well, we call them sharps and flats. And this is another just basic concept that we need to appreciate in music, is that higher, as we go higher, it's getting sharper. Okay, that's what we call that. When it's getting higher, it's getting sharper. Okay, if you're tuning your guitar and the string is too high, so you got to make it go down lower, that means it's sharp. It's too high. It's sharp. Okay, so sharp is up, right? Flat is the opposite. Okay, so flat means it's too low or it's lower, right? So flat means going down, right? And so we use that kind of idea to name these notes. So let's go back to our note that's between A and B, okay? If we were going to name it using the A, it's a little higher than the A. So it's sharp. It's above the A. It's sharp. And so we would call that an A sharp if we were going to use the A note to name it. It's A plus sharp, okay? If we're going to use the B, we would call it a B flat because we're going down, right? And so that's the same exact sounding note. I just played an A sharp. I just played a B flat, okay? They're the exact same note. It's just 2 different names for the same thing, and it's based on whether you're naming it with the upper note above it or the lower note beneath it, okay? So A sharp going up, B flat going down, right? And it's the same for all of these, okay? And so all 5 of those have that kind of thing. So we've got A sharp, B flat. We just covered the one between C and D is C sharp or D flat. C up sharp, D flat down. the one between D and E is what? D sharp, right? Or E flat, right? So D sharp or E flat. The F, between the F and the G, there's F sharp or G flat. You get the idea. Between G and A, we've got to cycle around. There's another, we've got to have that little extra one. We got to have another A so we can see that there's another note in between the G and the A, and there's G sharp, that one's G sharp or E flat. Okay, so there it is, all laid out for you. And if we just take these and string them out, you can see how all those notes are named. I wanted to remind you though, if you look here, there's no black key between B and C, right? And there's no black key between E and F. So there's no B sharp or C flat in there, right? That doesn't exist. Same with E and F. There's no E sharp or F flat in between those two notes, right? And so that's important to remember as you're laying this out, okay? So now if I just lay out all of our notes all the way across, you can see how they progress, okay? So we've got the A and then the A sharp and so on, okay? All the way across. All right, now let's go to your guitar for a second to map this onto the guitar. And I'm going to use the A string to demonstrate this. And it's the string on your guitar it's the second one down. It's the second thickest string. It's this one. And when you play that string open, we're going to go over this in a second. When you play that string open, that's an A note. That's an A, okay? That's the A, okay? And so now, if we were just going up the guitar using the sharp kind of notion to name the strings, each one of these frets on the guitar represents a movement along this little scale here, from A to A sharp to B, and so on. So each fret takes us up one of those notes in that sequence. Okay, so we start with A, open, and then we fret on the first fret. That's A sharp, B, C. There's nothing in between B and C, right? C sharp, D, D sharp, E. Nothing between E and F, so the next one's F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. We're back. Okay. If you look on the guitar, you'll see that there's usually two dots or some kind of special mark on the 12th fret when we get to the 12th note. Okay. And that's how you know you're at the octave. It's where that double dot is, or usually there's some other kind of special marker there, okay? That's using sharps. Now we could have just as well have done that with flats, right? So I could have said A, and then the next note, instead of A sharp, I could call it a B flat. So let's do it with flats. A, B flat, B, nothing between B and C, so the next one's C, then D flat, D, E flat, E, nothing between E and F, F, then G flat, then G, then A flat, and then we're back. Ta-da! Okay, so those are all the notes, and you do the same thing on the other strings. The lowest string is E. You start on an E, so E, and then there's nothing between E and F. That's the next one. E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, etc., all the way up. Or it's the same thing with flats. E, F, and then G flat instead of F sharp, G flat, G, A flat, A, and so on all the way up the neck. Okay? Same thing with these other strings. We'll learn about that later, but just so you understand. When you go up a fret or you go from one note to another in this little scale right here, that is called, when you go up one spot, that's called a half a step. A half a step. So each fret on the guitar is a half a step. Even when you're going from E to F, okay, it's still just a half a step. there's nothing in between there, so there can't be a whole step. You need two halves to make a whole, right? And so there's no half step in between those. So just going from E to F is a half step. Same thing going from B to C. When there's nothing in between, that's a half step. So every single one of these frets is a half step, okay? If you go 2 frets, we call that a whole step. And that's going to become important very, very shortly. But that's kind of how this kind of stuff maps on to the guitar neck, okay? Okay, I think that's pretty much it for how the notes are named, okay? But I wanted to just finish this off by talking about how the strings are named and what notes they are across the whole guitar. And that's going to become important as we try to tune our guitar in the next lesson, okay? And so these strings are tuned to the following notes, lowest to highest. The lowest one is E, just said that. Then A, okay, if we keep going, 1, 2, the next one is D, the next highest one, D, then G, then B, and then E, okay, E, A, D, G, B, E, okay. Now, I said something there I probably shouldn't have, which is I started calling this the first string, the second string. I shouldn't do that, okay? Out in the guitar world, the strings are numbered the opposite way, okay? So people call, if they could say the first string or the second string, the first string, they mean the highest one. That's the first string, the second string, third string, fourth, fifth. I think that's confusing for a bunch of different reasons. I don't like it, and I don't think it's necessary to label them that way. In this course, I will call the strings by their names. I will call them the A string or the B string. I'll say, put your finger on the 3rd fret of the B string. I won't say, put your finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. Okay, that'd be saying the same thing, but it's confusing to people because they feel like this string over here is the 2nd string. And so when I say, put your finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, the kind of automatic response is to go there. That doesn't, we don't want to mess with that, okay? And so we're going to call the strings by their names, and that'll get you used to understanding the notes as well. So that's what we're going to do in this course. But just in case you hear it out there, someone says play something on the 1st string or the 3rd string, you'll know they're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All right. Now, just to finish up again, let's try to remember the names of our strings. E, A, D, G, B, E. E, A, D, G, B, E. If you can just straight memorize that and know that this one's E and this one's D and this one's G, that would be a great thing to get into your head. But people have little devices that they've invented, little sentences to help you remember E, A, D, G, B. And, you know, there's a bunch of them, but one is Eddie, 8, dynamite, good, bye, Eddie. And they'll start with E, A, D, G, B, E. Eddie, 8, dynamite, good, bye, Eddie. Okay. Another one is elephants and donkeys, E, A, D, grow big ears, G, B, E. Elephants and donkeys grow big ears. I never found it necessary to have those things, but if it helps you, great. You know, remember that one, or there's other ones online you can look up or make up your own. Okay, perfectly fine. Any way you can get that into your head is good by me. Okay. All right, I think that's basically it. Once you know that these strings are E, A, D, G, B, you can find any note you want because you have that little map of the notes. And, you know, so if you need to find a C, for example, you know that this string is the A string. And so to find C, I go A sharp, B, nothing between B and C, C. So there's C, okay? Now, that's not something you need to memorize right now, but it will become important very soon, and I will be talking about that and reinforcing it as we go through the course, okay? That's it for this lesson. Hope you are enjoying these little forays into music theory. There's not going to be a ton of them, but they are going to be there because they're going to help you understand what's going on. And with this lesson, you've got already all the basic tools that you need in order to understand the next level of theory. All right, everybody. See you next time.